by letting you guys know. So there's a chat option on this. So if you guys have a question, put it in the chat because then I get like a flashing notification. And somewhere there's an icon where you can raise your hand and you can look at it that way. Patrick says hello. So he has found the chat option. What I want to show you guys is just some stuff on Google that I'm trying to set up to make it easier for you guys. So on your calendar, underneath these apps, you guys should all have a calendar. And I am trying to schedule the Zoom meetings and everything through calendar and just invite you to it that way. So you don't need to go and like find links. Instead, you can just go to the calendar and hopefully like let me know if this actually isn't true or not. Once this loads, you should then just be able to like click on whatever day and time it is. And I've scheduled it for you. So once you click on it, you can just hit Zoom meeting and you won't have to like go searching for the link. It should all just be on your calendars. That'll be the same way that you get in for office hours. So we have office hours every day from 2 to 3, and I'm just gonna have an ongoing Zoom thing so that if you guys have questions, you can just pop in, ask your question, leave. It's not scheduled. Another thing I'm trying to do for you guys is in your drive, I have shared a folder with you guys that is gonna take forever to load. But I'm trying to put, and my internet might go out, we'll see. I'm gonna put PDFs of the notes in here so that it's all in one spot. So if you guys need something to reference back to, I'm just trying to do that to help keep you organized. In that, I made this like online learning handout, and it's kind of just everything that my plan is right now, and it might all change after next week once we get into this and I realize that things might not work. So you guys already know you only have class every other day. So when homework is due is the next time we meet. So like I'm gonna give you guys homework today. It will literally take you 4 minutes. It is due next Monday because since it's Wednesday, it's gonna be due at the next class period. Your grading is gonna be still like homework like normal. The thing that's going to be different is I'm going to start giving like homework points for doing the notes. So like hopping onto this Zoom call, you guys are going to take the notes, like that counts. And it's kind of just an accountability to make sure that we're still keeping in touch. Because honestly, my main thing is to keep this as class-like as possible and not just like, I don't want you guys to think of this as homeschool. I'm still here for you. Like I'm still here to help you and all that stuff. So that's going to be a new part of your grade. Is just by like doing the notes and participating in this stuff. I will give you guys points for it. And then at the bottom of this, I linked a couple things because in case you don't have one of the million scientific calculators that G has at home right now, here's an online version that he has them all the calculators. Here's an online that I just put some links on there that might be helpful for you guys to use. So this might change, it might not change, I have no idea. Okay. Oh, do we have a question? Oh, I don't know about that. The other thing that I have at home is I have my document camera. So this is my plan for notes and for helping you guys is, it just shut down on me. So isn't this fun? I hope you guys are all having it's like Wednesday. Nobody knows what day of the week it is anymore, but we're back to Wednesday. I have this at home and I'm just printing off the notes and I'll just fill them in this way. So rather than on the smartboard, I will just go through them this way. I did share this document with you guys yesterday. What I need from you is like, I don't know how glitchy this is gonna be. So stop me if you have a question or anything like that. But we're just going to start going through the notes. So we are starting a brand new unit rather than like finish out trig and give a test on that. Like third quarter is done. This is fourth quarter. And we're going to start the stats unit. So for stats, we start by just like a whole bunch of definitions. Whole thing is like the whole study of statistics is you want to get samples to talk about a population. So a population is just like everyone. So the population of the United States, the world, whatever. But obviously, like if you want to know information, you can't ask the entire population. So your goal is to get a sample, which is just a smaller set of it, and you want it to be unbiased. So unbiased just means that it's like an equal representation, like it's a good sample. It's not going to be swayed one way or the other. How you get that, there are different types, and these are just definitions already there. So if I wanted to get a sample of kids, I could take a convenient sample, and a convenient sample is literally, it's like, it's convenient for you. So if I had a question and I just wanted to ask like all of you guys, that's a convenient sample for me because you're already grouped together. Like it's very easy for me to just say like, hey, what do you think about this? The next type is a systematic sample. So a systematic means that you have a predetermined rule. So that would be like if you asked every 8th person, like there's a system that you're picking the people. A systematic sample just means it's essentially like you're asking these many people. It's a rule that you've already determined before you start taking your sample. A stratified sample. Stratified, if you just think of like stratification and like geology as layers. So a stratified sample means members are put into smaller groups or layers with similar characteristics, and then you randomly select from all of the groups. So it'd be like you put, these are like the kids who play hockey, these are the kids who play basketball, these are the kids who wrestle. So you've put them into similar characteristics, and then you decide like, I'm going to pick 2 out of each group. So that would be a stratified sample because you've like grouped them, and then you're picking from those groups. A cluster sample is very similar to a stratified sample, but once you have them in their groups or clusters, instead of taking like 2 from each group, you're like, all right, I'm just going to ask all the wrestlers. So instead of picking a couple from each group, you just pick one whole group. And then a self-selected sample are members that volunteer for it. So it'd be like anytime you've ever answered a poll on Twitter, like you are creating a self-selected sample because you choose if you're going to answer it or not. Pretty much everything today is just going to be identifying like what things are. So identifying the sample style. If you want to gauge the popularity of the new design of a school's website, if you list all the students alphabetically and then choose every 6th student, that is creating a sample, but then you just have to decide, okay, well, what type of sample is it? Since it's choosing every 6th out of the options given above, I don't know if I can make it so they both show, that one's going to be a systematic just because it's every 6th student. If you tweet out a questionnaire and ask only, and use only the responses of the people who respond. So you tweet out the questionnaire and then people just respond. Since they get to choose if they respond or not, that's self-selected. If you ask all of the kids in your Algebra 2 class, so out of these options, if you needed to create something for like AP Psych and you needed to ask a group of people, if you just ask everyone in your Algebra 2 class, that would be considered a cluster sample because the kids are already grouped together. Like they're already grouped, like these kids all take Algebra 2. And then last one, you randomly select 2 students from each classroom during 5th hour. So that one, it's similar to Part C where they're being grouped by their 5th hours. But since you're not asking everyone, you're just asking a couple of each one. That's what a stratified sample looks like. It's terrible handwriting, but you can kind of see they're similar, but instead of asking the whole group, you're just asking a couple. Depending on the type of sample, everything has bias, and if you are ever collecting data for a study, you want to be as unbiased as possible. So identifying like how bias can play into these sampling styles is important. So a question, the Herald invites their readers to answer a poll about property tax increases. So by the Herald inviting them, that is creating a self-selected sample. And the reason that self-selected a lot of times has bias is if you are ever asked to fill out a questionnaire, there's really only going to be 2 types of people who respond to it. Either those that were really, really, really for it or really, really, really against it. Like middle of the road people do not usually respond to a self-selected. So this one, you're only going to get the extremes. Like you're going to have the people that are really for a property tax increase and really against it. The people that don't care either way, they're not going to take the time to voice their opinion on it. Same thing, like how many of you guys really like enter the code at the bottom of your receipt for 50 cents off? Like nobody really does it because it's not worth their time. So if it's something they're not really passionate for, they are not gonna go for it. This question I worded absolutely terribly. If I wanted to know how many kids have their own calculators at home and I asked you guys. So if me wanting to know this information and I want to know how many kids have a calculator at home, and I choose to ask fifth hour, if I am only asking my fifth hour, for me, that's a convenience. Because if it makes it super easy for me as the recorder, whatever, to just ask a group of people that's readily available, that's a convenient sample. So if you are ever just asking that kind of stuff, that makes it a convenience. If someone else were to come in and ask you guys, like in my class, that would be more of like a cluster sample because you guys are grouped together, but it's not so much in that way. Is there a question in the comments I should read? It like blinked and then it went away. I'm just going to keep going. So the bias in this convenience sample is I'm not going to get all students' voices heard, because me asking an Algebra 2 class, like that is one type of kid. I'm not asking the seniors who aren't in a math. I'm not asking the freshmen who might be in a math class where they don't really need it, so they don't have one at home. So a convenience sample, it's not always going to get the best responses. Correct. G does have a lot of calculators at home. All right, so samplings all introduce bias. The goal is really just like, how can you identify bias or how do you avoid bias? So that is the first part. I am going to pause the recording. So once like people who do stat studies decide how they're going to get their sample of people, they then have to decide like how are they going to actually collect the data. So like once you know like I'm going to ask this group of people, like what are you going to do to collect the actual data? There's four main types of data collection. One is an experiment, which is exactly what you would think. You put a treatment on individuals and then collect the data, like a medical experiment. So like I give you this thing to see if it helps with your cholesterol, that would be an experiment. What you do in science classes, like they're called experiments because you create a variable on a control and then see how it changes. An observational study is just when you observe. So you don't knowingly control anything, you just observe like how people interact and base it off of that. These two, I have these definitions flip-flopped. So if you printed these off by any chance, like flip-flop those around because I don't know how I messed that up. In a simulation is when a model is produced because to like look at the outcomes, because it's probably going to be like too risky to actually make it happen. So like computer simulations, when they do simulations to see like how bad a hurricane is going to be, like obviously they can't sit there and just like make it happen. So they try to replicate it digitally and then base it off of what that outcome is. And then a survey is a really common method, and that's just when you essentially fill out a questionnaire. And then when you answer a survey, there's things that like make a good and bad survey questions, and it's kind of just like, is it a leading question? So if I were to ask you like, isn't doing school online just the absolute best? Like that word is like leading you to a response. It could be a loaded question, so something that really like triggers an emotion for something. So a lot of times like political questions are loaded questions because it really like puts people into two categories. If you don't get it, like if the question is too vague, it makes it a bad question. And then if you have multiple questions in one, like if you are asking a question, you should ask one question. So just things to look out for, like to make something, if it's good or bad survey. Identifying the types of data collection, pretty much same thing, using it off of that. So if you have 3 bean plants and they are either fed water, milk, or sugar, and then you record their heights. So how is that data being collected? Like what type is that? That one is clearly an experiment. And it would be an experiment because you are enforcing these conditions and then recording what the outcome is. If Mr. Strandell records whether students hold the door open for them in the morning. So in that case, like Mr. Strandell is not like telling you to open or close the door. He's not interrupting it in any way. That would be an observational study because he's just observing what people are doing, but he's not trying to control the situation or anything like that. And then the last one, if the CDC creates a computer program to determine how fast COVID-19 might spread in Alaska. Obviously, they're creating a program that's using a simulation. So obviously, those are going on right now because if people are trying to figure out how something is working and they can't like make it happen on their own, a simulation using other data can be helpful to predict where things are going. Last thing, and this really has nothing to do with gathering data. It's more so like one last thing of bias, because I tried to make this lesson so it was all like bias based. How close can this get? All right, misleading graphs. So a lot of times, like if you just look in places, that got a little bit better. Data can be given in lots of different ways, and sometimes like if you are given a representation, just be careful that it's not misleading in any way. People will try to like throw off if something is a good or a bad graph just by checking things like the scales, the titles, images, and so forth. So in 2005, Florida enacted something called Stand Your Law with gun control. And if you look at this graph, it looks like after that law was reintroduced, that like gun deaths went down. But on the side here, if you look at the scale is inverted. So if you count the scale like you normally would, you would actually see that when the law was introduced in 2005, gun deaths actually increased. So just things like that about like bias can be shown in how they get the sample, how they create a survey question, or even in how it's like presented. And I just tried to make this lesson as like to the point of like if something has bias or not.